So we are here at Sigtuna Stiftelsen. Your Eminence More Polycarpos. Pleased to meet you, to have you here. And you are the Archbishop of the Syriac Orthodox Church in the Netherlands. And you're also the rector of the St. Ignatius Seminary in Södertälje, and play an important role here in this conference of the future of Syriac studies. I would like to ask your Eminence, first of all, of the role of Syriac studies in our world today, given the background that a lot of Syriac studies sort of covers the early church, the first past of centuries in Syria and other parts of the Middle East. Your Eminence, you yourself, you live in the Netherlands, a secularized country, and have connections with Sweden also with its conditions here. Can you say something about the role that Syriac theology, Syriac studies could have in the world in which we live today?
Yes, thank you. When we look at Christian tradition, we see three main components for the Christian tradition, namely the Latin West, the Greek East, and the Syriac Orient. Each of these Christian traditions has a characteristic which may differ from the others. When we look at the Syriac Orient, we see that it's rooted in the biblical Semitic world, out of which the Bible and Christianity and the three monotheistic religions sprang. Also employs Syriac, a local Aramaic dialect of Edessa, which is not all that different from the Galilean Aramaic which Christ himself would have spoken. The thought patterns, the poetry, the liturgical and the ascetic wealth and literature that's available makes it very significant. And we see the Syriac tradition not as a rival, but as complementary to the other two traditions. Therefore, the presence of the Syriac Christians in the Western European and the Western Hemisphere in general makes a special contribution to the other two components of the Christian tradition, because what they offer is very Semitic and is unique and it's mystical, and it may also speak to the heart of the people here in the West, who sometimes give too more space and put emphasis on the rational aspect of religion and society. So therefore the mystical and the symbolic theology of the church fathers like Ephraim and others gives something which is not to be found in the other two Christian traditions, namely the Latin West and the Greek East to a certain extent.
And you mentioned the word mystical. I believe you think in terms of what is not for us to grasp, to know about God, but still is there a possibility to reach this unknowable God in prayer or in liturgy? Or can you say something more about the mystical dimension?
Yes, certainly. The church fathers of the Syriac tradition quite often they express themselves through the medium of poetry rather than prosa. So therefore they find poetry a better medium to express the mystery of God and faith. So therefore this seems to be more attractive today. In the past people saw this something as not relevant, something alien. How can you express theological ideas, concepts through the medium of poetry? Whereas today people appreciate that more and more, both on a scholarly level and in the popular way. So therefore what the Syriac fathers have to offer in terms of Syriac spirituality, the Syriac liturgy, and the Syriac theology, which is expressed in the medium of poetry, is very relevant to our own days and makes it very attractive. And a number of people find their way towards the Syriac church by these means. When we look at, for example, the Syriac monastic tradition, we see that it has become very popular and exerted a great deal of influence. One of the most known Syriac ascetic writers and monastic figures is Isaac of Nineveh, also known as Saint Isaac the Syrian, who exerted influence from Qatar, his birthplace, to Tokyo, who was a bishop of Nineveh in modern-day Mosul in modern-day Iraq. So we see that although he belonged to the Church of the East, and yet he is embraced and he is studied and well received by all other churches, be it in the East Oriental and the Eastern Orthodox, as well as the Latin churches, and including some of the Protestants like the Anglicans. So it tells us that such figures are very well received, and today people find significance in the writings and meaning for their daily life. We have also the church fathers like Ephrem the Syrian, who is well known both within the Oriental and Eastern Orthodox tradition as well as in the Latin tradition, since his feast is celebrated in the Roman Catholic Church as well as the Anglican Church, which in fact occurred on the 9th of June. So this tells us that the Syriac tradition offers something to our world and our churches today in the Western Hemisphere, Western European culture and society, that is fresh, that is enriching, that is giving a new perspective, as it were, to us today.
And both the hymns to Paradise and hymns to faith by Ephrem Syrian has been translated into Swedish. So there is by Sten Hidal, a Swedish translation of these hymns, this poetry. And is these poems, are they meant to be read or to be sung or accompanied with music, or can you say something about how to use them?
Well, most of the poetry and the hymnody of Ephrem is also to be found in the liturgical corpus of the Syriac Church. So we have what we call the Shema, the weekday office, and we have the Thalpito, the yearly cycle of liturgical prayers, and there we find most of the hymns of Saint Ephrem. And these are chanted and sung during the liturgy, and also outside of the liturgy. Some of the hymns which are attributed to him are also very popular among the faithful. They chant them, they sing them when they get together for fellowship, for spiritual evenings and gatherings.
And let us now move to your own creativity. I have the impression that you write poems, hymns yourself, and perform them, and so there is part of your own heart is also full of this spirituality.
Thank you. Yes, in fact, I'm very much interested in poetry, and poetry is very much part of the Syriac tradition. The Church Fathers, as I mentioned earlier, expressed their theology through the medium of poetry, and to this very day poetry remains a very active component of the Syriac Christian tradition. I do compose dialogue poems and poems in general, as I did, for example, compose a dialogue poem for Sebastian and his wife Helen to honor them for what they have done and for their cultivation of the field of Syriac studies. And on Thursday I have also composed a poem in the meter of Saint Ephrem, one of his nativity hymn called Yona Plito Tainole, again to be recited and chanted on Thursday evening when we award Sebastian Brock with the award of St. Ignatius Award.
Then let me ask Your Eminence about your own research, apart from writing poetry. We met actually some 7 years ago in Campion Hall in Oxford, where you were doing research there. Do you have time as an Archbishop to sit in the library and study the old manuscripts? How is the time for research today?
Well, time is limited, but I make time as much as possible. And in fact, when I attend symposia, when I do research in Syriac, and when I meet scholars, it gives me motivation and energy to do that. My research was in the early church history and monastic tradition. I did write my dissertation comparing the Syriac monastic profession with baptism, both from the external structure and ideological things. And here I would like also to thank Campion Hall, and especially Father Joseph Munitis, who was very instrumental in receiving me to Campion Hall and providing us with accommodation and scholarship, while I did follow the Master of Syriac Studies under the auspices of Sebastian Brock. And I finished, in fact, my dissertation, writing my dissertation at Campion Hall again. So I'm grateful for the Jesuit community giving me a space to excel spiritually and academically. I think doing research is very important, because when we look at the church fathers and the past, we see that the monasteries were not only a place of spirituality, but they were also a place of learning and scribal activity. And there the monks did not only engage themselves with theological, biblical, and liturgical, but also with scientific subjects. So therefore they inspire us, they give us the example to do the same. And today we are able to climb on their shoulders to see further and farther what they have contributed, what they have given us, what they have left for us is not only an enrichment for the Syriac tradition, but this is a legacy, this is an enrichment and wealth to be shared with the Christian tradition as a whole, and especially through immigration, that the Syriac churches find themselves scattered all over, and the immigration brought the Eastern and the Western Christians closer to one another, and therefore we need collaboration to be able to translate and put the Syriac tradition in the European context to make it relevant for the new generation of the Syriac-speaking faithful, as well as for the fellow European Christians who have interest in the Syriac tradition. And I believe together we can make Christian tradition rich, more dynamic and more relevant for the society, modern society in which we find ourselves today.
So I hope to contribute to such collaboration on behalf of the Jesuits and the institutions we have. May we conclude with a short example in the Syriac language, maybe Glory be to the Father and the Son, or if you have a short poem by heart, it would be very nice for the Swedish audience.
Well, I can recite a poem from the anthology of Bar Abroyo, a Syriac polymath who was a contemporary of Thomas Aquinas. He wrote a poem about love, about agape. It goes like this. Tubo shafio min kol sharvin shafir sharvo. Tuba uleino dablo plebe ailkat. Morio ahlo of geraheb leino lahlo. More than moyo wa'oyo fato lerokat. Pure love, your story is more delightful than any other story. Blessed are those who inscribe you on the board of their heart. The Lord loves you and loves those who love you Therefore, woe to the people who do not approach you.
Thank you very much, Your Eminence, More Polycarpos. It was a delightful conversation.
Thank you.
Delightful.
Thank you.